The classroom smelled faintly of polished metal and recycled air, a reminder that they were far from Earth. On the distant colony of Arendor, schools were built in towering, transparent modules that floated above the rocky plains. The sunlight reflected off the crystal walls, scattering rainbows across the smooth floors. In one such classroom, children sat at sleek desks, their eyes wide with anticipation. Today's lesson was different. Today they would learn about monsters. Ms. Kale, the teacher, stood at the front, her eyes bright behind the reflective glasses that adjusted to the sunlight. She had a reputation for turning even the driest lessons into vivid stories. "Monsters are not always what you think," she said, her voice calm but carrying an edge of excitement. "They come in many forms, some we have studied, others we have yet to discover. What makes humans different is how we react when faced with them." The students shifted in their seats. Lyra, a tall girl with short brown hair, leaned forward. She loved stories of adventure, of humans meeting creatures that could crush them with a single strike. She raised her hand. "Are we going to learn about real monsters or just myths, Ms. Kale?" "The line between myth and reality is thinner than you think," Ms. Kale replied, smiling. "Some monsters you will only see in books, some may be watching you right now." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. A shiver ran through the students, not from fear but from excitement. Unseen by any of them, a shadow slipped along the ceiling vent. It was small at first, barely noticeable, but its eyes, dark and reflective, followed every movement. The creature had been living in the colony for weeks, quietly observing humans. Unlike the aggressive monsters in the stories, it did not attack. Instead, it was curious, listening to every word, learning from every gesture. Today, it had chosen to watch the classroom. Ms. Kale moved to a holographic display that shimmered above her desk. Images of alien creatures filled the air, beings with 6 arms, luminous wings, and eyes that glowed in the dark. The students gasped at the variety and strangeness of life in the galaxy. Some creatures looked terrifying, others beautiful, but all seemed to have something in common. They were unpredictable. "Humans have survived countless dangers," Ms. Kale continued. "We are not the strongest or the fastest, but our greatest power is our mind. We learn, we adapt, we cooperate. That is how we face monsters." The students nodded, captivated. Lyra whispered to her friend Joran, "I hope we never meet a real one." Joran laughed softly. "Maybe one day we will, and then we'll know if we are really as clever as Ms. Kale says." The creature in the vent tilted its head. Clever. That word sparked something inside it. The humans were clever indeed. It could sense it. Every idea they spoke, every solution they imagined showed a kind of intelligence unlike anything the creature had seen before. Ms. Kale then divided the class into teams. Each team was to imagine a scenario, a human encountering a dangerous monster on a distant planet. They would need to plan how to survive. The students immediately leaned forward, their pens moving over their data pads, ideas flowing like sparks in a dark room. Lyra's team chose a forested world, filled with enormous plants and creatures that could move as fast as a starship. "We need to think about how the monster hunts," Lyra said, her eyes scanning the holographic map. "And how we can trick it, use the environment to our advantage." Her teammates nodded. Joran added, "Humans have imagination. We can use traps, distractions, even the terrain itself. That's how we survive, not by fighting blindly." Above them, the creature watched, invisible and silent. It began to see a pattern in the humans' behavior. They did not rely solely on strength. They considered options, predicted outcomes, and worked together. It did not understand their emotions fully, but it could see that their cooperation was powerful. Ms. Kale moved among the teams, peeking at their plans. She smiled at Lyra's careful reasoning. "Remember," she said softly, "the monsters you design may be strong, but humans are clever. Think about what we do when we cannot win with force." The creature twitched its ear-like appendages. Force. They were not afraid of monsters. That was unusual. Most creatures it had encountered were either terrified or submissive. Humans, these tiny beings, had an unpredictable spark. It made the creature curious. Could they survive real danger? Could they survive it together? A sudden clatter made the students jump. A holographic tablet had fallen from a desk, spinning in the air. Lyra caught it just before it hit the floor. "It's nothing," she said, trying to hide her racing heart. But the others looked around, eyes wide. Small things were happening. Lights flickering, shadows moving, but they brushed it off as malfunctions. The creature stayed still, listening, observing every subtle reaction. Every detail of human behavior was a lesson for it. They were brave, yes, but more than that, they adapted instantly. The way Lyra calculated angles for her trap, the way Jorn suggested using sound to confuse a predator, it fascinated the creature. Class ended, but the lesson lingered. Ms. Cal gathered the students for reflection. "What did we learn today?" she asked. "Humans survive not because we are the strongest, but because we are clever, observant, and brave. A monster may be dangerous, but understanding it is even more powerful," the students murmured, agreeing. They felt proud of their ideas, their creativity. They did not yet know that the classroom was not empty after all. The creature hiding in the vent had learned more than they realized. It had listened to every strategy, every plan, every clever solution they proposed. As the students left the classroom laughing and talking, the creature remained. Its dark eyes reflected the sunlight, and something almost like admiration glimmered within them. Humans, fragile, small, but clever, unpredictable, dangerous in ways most monsters could never understand. And for the first time, the creature wondered, could it be possible that the real monsters were not always the ones with claws or teeth? Could the humans themselves, in their unpredictable cleverness, be the true force to respect or fear? It waited silently, planning its next move. Tomorrow it might reveal itself, or it might wait longer. Either way, the lesson had begun, and the monster was listening. The next day, the classroom was filled with the soft hum of the colony's energy grid. Sunlight bounced off the crystalline walls, painting streaks of gold across the desks. Lyra entered first, her brown hair tucked behind her ears. She noticed something strange immediately. Her desk was slightly moved from where she had left it yesterday. "It must be the cleaning drones," she muttered, shaking her head. But a small tingle ran down her spine. She could not explain why it felt different. The other students noticed small changes too. A book had shifted slightly. A pen rolled across the floor without any push. Even Joran, usually quick to dismiss small oddities, paused mid-step, frowning. Ms. Kale entered, smiling as always. "Good morning, class. Today we continue our lesson about monsters, but this time we will explore how monsters react to humans." The students perked up. Lyra whispered to Joran, "I hope this is just another story." "I hope not," Joran replied, his grin half excited, half nervous. Unseen above them, the creature stirred in the vent. It had spent the night observing, learning from their plans. Each student's approach, each solution had impressed it. Humans did not simply fight. They adapted. They cooperated. They thought ahead. Unlike the predictable animals or mindless aliens the creature had known, humans were clever. That word again, clever. It echoed in the creature's mind like a spark. Ms. Kale began the lesson by showing a simulation of a forest planet filled with dangerous predators. "Imagine," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You are explorers. You step into a world where everything is alive and some creatures are hungry. How do you survive?" Lyra's team immediately huddled over their pads, sketching and calculating. "We need to understand the monster first," Lyra said. "What does it want? How does it move? We can use that to plan our next step," Joran added. "Humans survive by predicting, by creating distractions, and by working together. That is our advantage." The creature listened, tilting its head, predicting, clever, working together. It had never encountered such creatures before. Most beings it knew relied on raw strength or instinct. Humans were different. They were flexible, unpredictable, and relentless in their curiosity. It decided to test them. Slowly, carefully, the creature caused small disturbances in the classroom. A pen hovered briefly before rolling off the desk. A holographic display flickered, showing a shadow moving faster than it should. A soft whisper passed through the air vents. The students jumped at first, startled. "Did you see that?" One whispered. "I think it's just a glitch," another said, though their voice trembled. Lyra, however, did not panic. She scanned the room, her mind racing. "Something is here," she said quietly. "But it's not trying to hurt us. At least not yet." Ms. Kale observed silently, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Curiosity," she said softly, "is often the first step to understanding." She let the students handle it, knowing that the best lessons sometimes came from experience. The creature found itself fascinated. Humans did not scream or flee. They analyzed, they collaborated, they adapted. One student, Mara, even spoke to the floating pen. "If you want to play tricks, fine," she said, "but we're not afraid. Show yourself if you want to learn with us." The creature paused. Learning? That word again. Could these fragile beings teach it something? Could it understand them? The students decided to turn the disturbances into a learning exercise. Lyra suggested a game. "Let's treat it as a puzzle. Something is moving things in the room. How can we figure out what it wants?" They worked together, testing ideas, observing reactions. When Mara waved her hand, the pen spun faster. When Joran clapped, the light flickered in a pattern. The creature realized that humans were testing it, not the other way around. For the first time, the creature felt something strange, a flicker of respect. These humans were not merely prey or playthings. They were intelligent, creative, and resilient. It could sense their potential. Ms. Kale noticed the subtle shift in the classroom. "Humans learn best when challenged," she said. "Sometimes a monster is not just a threat, it is a teacher." Lyra nodded. "We're learning," she said, smiling. "Not about monsters, but about ourselves." The creature moved closer, invisible, drawn by the energy and courage of the humans. It began mimicking them subtly. When Lyra raised her hand to suggest a plan, a faint shadow in the corner mirrored the motion. When Mara laughed, a soft sound echoed back, almost like mimicry. The humans began to notice small patterns. "It's like it's watching," Joran said, excitement creeping into his voice. "And maybe learning." "Yes," Lyra agreed. "And we can learn from it too. If it's intelligent, we can understand it without fear." The lesson continued with simulations. Students faced challenges designed to test logic, teamwork, and creativity. The creature observed every strategy, every solution. It began to adapt as well, subtly rearranging the environment to see how humans would respond. The students never guessed that their teacher was guiding the creature indirectly, giving it subtle hints, letting it experience human ingenuity firsthand. Each solution the children devised impressed it more. Their brains worked together like a finely tuned machine, and their hearts pushed them to care for each other even under pressure. By the end of the lesson, the creature had learned something important. Humans were unpredictable, clever, and resourceful. They did not rely on brute force. They used reason, observation, and empathy. And above all, they never gave up. As the students packed their things to leave, Lyra paused and looked around. "I feel like someone was watching us," she said softly, but not in a bad way. "It's like curiosity." Ms. Kale smiled knowingly. "Curiosity," she said again, "is the beginning of understanding. Sometimes monsters are not what you think. And sometimes, humans are not what monsters expect." The creature withdrew to the shadows of the vent, reflecting on the day. Humans were tiny, fragile beings, yet they were formidable in ways it had never seen. Cleverness, courage, and cooperation. They were weapons far more powerful than claws or teeth. And for the first time, the creature felt a strange sensation, one it could not fully name: admiration. Tomorrow, it thought, it would move closer. Tomorrow, it might reveal itself. But tonight, it would remember what it had seen. Humans were more than their strength or size. They were clever, inventive, and brave. And that made them dangerous in a way no monster had ever understood. It waited silently, listening, planning, learning, and the humans, unaware, were teaching it lessons it would never forget. The morning sun stretched across the crystal walls of the classroom, turning the floor into a river of golden light. Students trickled in, chattering about the day ahead, still energized from yesterday's unusual lesson. Lyra felt a strange anticipation in the air, a tingling sensation she could not explain. Something was different. She noticed it first, a shadow that moved against the natural flow of light. It was subtle, barely there, but enough to make her pause. Her classmates did not seem to notice, caught up in their conversation and the excitement of a new day. Ms. Kale entered, her usual calm smile in place. "Good morning, class," she said. "Today we will continue our exploration of monsters, but some lessons are best learned in experience, not theory." The students perked up. Experience? Lyra's curiosity flared. Yesterday, she had felt something watching them. Could it be that today would bring answers? As the lesson began, the creature hidden in the vent made its first deliberate move. A pen hovered in midair, spinning slowly, catching the light as if performing a small dance. The students froze, their eyes following the motion. "Did you see that?" Mara whispered, her voice tinged with excitement. "Yes," Joran said, leaning forward. "Something is here. I don't know what, but it's intelligent." The pen stopped spinning and fell gently onto the desk. The creature had tested them, observing reactions, measuring fear, noting curiosity. Humans did not panic. They analyzed. They adapted. Lyra took a deep breath. It's not trying to hurt us," she said quietly. "It's curious." The creature listened, tilting its head. Curious. That word again. Could these humans truly understand it? Could they respond without fear? It decided to test them further. A soft flicker ran through the lights above, casting quick-moving shadows across the walls. Students gasped but did not scream. Ms. Kale observed silently, allowing the interaction to unfold naturally. "Show yourself if you want to learn with us," Lyra said boldly. Her voice carried confidence, not arrogance. She was small, fragile, but unafraid. For a moment, the classroom was silent, save for the hum of the colony's energy systems. Then from the vent above, a soft, low sound echoed, a whisper of intelligence. The creature's voice was not like human voices. It was deep, resonant, almost musical. The students froze. Some pressed back against their desks, startled, while Lyra stepped forward slightly, her heart racing but her mind steady. I think it understands us," she said. "We need to communicate carefully." The creature tilted its head, intrigued. It could understand language. It could recognize patterns, intentions, and even emotions, but it had never encountered beings who could think so clearly, react so quickly, and yet show restraint and empathy. Humans were unlike any creature it had known. Ms. Kale nodded subtly at Lyra, signaling her to proceed. "Communication," she whispered, "is the first step to understanding. Let them see your mind as well as your courage." Lyra raised her hand slowly. "We don't want to fight. We want to learn from you, and maybe you can learn from us. Can you show yourself?" The air in the vent shimmered. Slowly, cautiously, a form emerged, a shadow that solidified into a creature unlike anything the students had ever seen. It was sleek and agile, its skin glimmering with a subtle iridescence. Its eyes were large and intelligent, reflecting curiosity and something like admiration. Gasps filled the room. Students leaned back, some stepping away, but Lyra remained still, her gaze steady. She noticed the creature's posture. It was cautious, not aggressive. Its head tilted as it observed them, as if measuring their reactions. "Hello," Lyra said softly. "We're not afraid. We want to understand." The creature made a soft humming sound. It mimicked the tone of her voice, a form of acknowledgement. It was learning. It was testing them, but it was also beginning to trust them. Joran stepped forward slightly, holding out a hand in a gesture of peace. "We've learned about monsters in stories and in simulations," he said. "But we've never met one. Now that we have, we see that you're more than we imagined. You're intelligent. You're curious, just like us." The creature's eyes focused on him, and for the first time it made a deliberate movement toward the center of the room. It hovered above the floor, landing lightly on its limbs. It was larger than any human, stronger, and yet it moved with grace, careful not to intimidate. Lyra whispered, "See? It's observing us. It's learning who we are." Over the next hour, the students engaged with the creature in small exercises. They moved objects, creating patterns, and the creature responded in kind. When they clapped in sequence, it mimicked the rhythm. When they used gestures to communicate, it mirrored them. Each interaction was a silent lesson, a growing understanding. Ms. Kale observed quietly from the front, her smile soft but proud. They are teaching it, yes, she thought, but they are also learning the greatest lesson of all. Courage and intelligence are stronger than fear. The creature was fascinated. Humans were unpredictable. They did not rely on brute force. They used logic, creativity, and empathy. Even when confronted with the unknown, they did not panic. They adapted. Their minds were weapons far sharper than claws or teeth. As the day progressed, Lyra suggested a new game, a puzzle where humans and the creature would work together to solve a problem. They had to move a floating holographic object through a complex obstacle course. Lyra directed her team, while the creature observed and then mimicked, adding its own creative solutions. The students cheered when they succeeded. The creature's deep, resonant hum echoed through the room, a sound that almost felt like approval. It had learned more in this one day than in weeks of observation. The humans' cleverness, their teamwork, their adaptability. It fascinated the creature. By the end of the lesson, a bond had formed, fragile but real. The humans understood that this monster was not a threat. The creature understood that humans were not helpless. Both sides had learned something valuable. As the students left the classroom, Lyra paused and looked back. The creature lingered near the vent, its eyes following her. For a moment it seemed almost thoughtful. Humans, it realized, were not monsters to fear. They were beings to respect, to learn from, and perhaps to befriend. Miss Kale's voice carried softly after them. The greatest lesson is not just about monsters, she said. It is about understanding courage, intelligence, and the human spirit itself. And today they have shown that humans can teach even the most curious monster a thing or two. The creature retreated to the shadows for now, but it did not vanish completely. It had seen enough to know that humans were clever, unpredictable, and brave. And it wanted to learn more. Tomorrow, it thought, the interactions would be deeper. It might reveal even more of itself. But for now it waited silently, learning, observing, and marveling at the strange, extraordinary creatures called humans. Humans were small, fragile and ordinary in appearance, but inside, they held a spark of brilliance that no monster had ever seen. That spark, the creature realized, was more dangerous than any weapon, and it was utterly fascinated. The next morning, sunlight poured through the crystal walls of the classroom, scattering patterns of light across the polished floors. The students entered, chatting excitedly about yesterday's encounter. Even Ms. Kale noticed a subtle change in the atmosphere. There was a sense of expectation, as if the classroom itself held its breath. Lyra's steps were light but purposeful. She had spent the night thinking about the creature. Its intelligence amazed her. It was no ordinary monster. It could understand, observe, and even respond to human thought. But most importantly, it had begun to show curiosity rather than aggression. "Do you think it will come again?" Mara whispered, adjusting her sleeve nervously. "It has to," Lyra replied. "It learned yesterday, and we have lessons to teach it too." From the vent above, the creature watched. It had spent the night replaying every interaction from the previous day. Humans were unpredictable, resourceful, and clever. It had mimicked some of their movements, experimented with shadows and sounds, and observed their problem-solving strategies. But it had also begun to feel something new, a strange fascination, almost admiration. The classroom remained quiet for a moment before Ms. Kale spoke. "Today, you will learn from a different kind of lesson," she said. "Sometimes learning comes not only from humans but from what we observe in others, even from monsters." The students perked up. Lyra felt a spark of excitement. She could feel it. Today the creature might reveal more of itself. It began subtly. A desk moved slightly, not enough to startle anyone but enough to draw attention. A holographic light flickered in a complex pattern. Mara leaned forward. "It's trying to communicate," she said softly. The creature had decided to experiment. It was testing the humans' patience, their observation skills, and their creativity. It observed their reactions carefully. Lyra smiled, understanding that this was part of the lesson. "Let's play a game," Lyra suggested. "We'll create challenges for each other and solve them together. That way we both learn." The students began arranging the desks, setting up simple obstacle courses with floating holograms and movable objects. The creature watched, then carefully began to participate. It mimicked the obstacles' movements but added new elements of its own, shapes that twisted and glowed, creating new patterns for the students to solve. The classroom became a place of silent communication. Humans and monster observed one another, responding to movements, signals, and patterns. The students quickly adapted. Joren suggested a solution, Mara implemented it, and Lyra coordinated the actions. Each move was precise, cooperative, and intelligent. The creature began to mirror these movements. Slowly, carefully, it replicated their strategies, adding subtle variations. The humans noticed and cheered softly when they succeeded, realizing that the monster was not only learning, they were teaching it. Ms. Kale watched with pride. "Observe carefully," she thought. "They are teaching more than survival strategies. They are teaching morality, patience, and collaboration. Indeed, the creature was learning. It observed how humans worked together, how they listened to one another, how they accounted for each other's mistakes and strengths. It marveled at their resilience and adaptability. It had never encountered a species that so naturally combined intelligence with empathy. Lyra noticed one pattern that fascinated her. "It's learning faster than I expected," she said. "It mimics our actions, but it also improvises. It's intelligent in ways different from us." "Yes," Jorn replied, "and we're learning from it too. We have to think carefully, communicate clearly, and trust each other." The classroom continued with challenges designed to test human creativity and cooperation. A holographic puzzle required multiple actions at the same time: moving objects, timing sequences, and predicting reactions. The creature participated actively, suggesting solutions in its own way. Though its movements were alien, they were precise and deliberate, reflecting its growing understanding of human logic. During a pause, Lyra looked at the creature directly. Its eyes were large, dark, and thoughtful. She could feel the intelligence within them. "You're learning," she whispered. "And we're learning too. Isn't that what all lessons are about?" The creature made a soft humming sound in response. Though it did not speak, its behavior indicated comprehension. It moved closer to the center of the classroom, hovering above the floor with careful control, observing each student. Over the next few hours, a rhythm developed. Humans and creature interacted through puzzles, games, and patterns. Each challenge taught the students more about the creature's intelligence, while simultaneously teaching the creature about human ingenuity, problem-solving, and morality. Ms. Kale occasionally stepped in, offering subtle guidance. "Notice," she said, "how it adapts to your decisions. You are shaping its understanding not with force but with clarity, empathy, and patience," the creature responded. When a holographic maze was created, it moved objects to help the students rather than hinder them. It seemed to understand that cooperation yielded better results than competition. For the first time, it began to mirror human behavior not only physically but strategically. Lyra, watching the creature carefully, realized something profound. Humans often thought of themselves as fragile, small, and weak. Yet, in this classroom, they displayed strength beyond muscles or weapons. Their courage, creativity, and intelligence allowed them to face the unknown with composure and clarity. That was their true power. By midday, the students had reached a point where they were no longer just playing with the creature. They were learning from it. Its adaptations challenged their thinking, pushing them to be faster, smarter, and more collaborative. Every success was mutual. Every failure was a lesson. The classroom, once ordinary, had become a place of understanding between two very different species. Trust was forming. Respect was growing. The creature was beginning to see humans not as prey or curiosities, but as equals in the realm of intelligence. Finally, Lyra suggested one last exercise before the lesson ended. "Let's try something new," she said. "We'll create a challenge together with the creature and solve it as a team. No winners or losers, just teamwork." The creature hesitated, then began to manipulate the holograms with precision. Objects floated, shifted, and arranged into patterns that required coordination from both humans and the creature. Every move had to be planned, anticipated, and executed together. It took time, patience, and careful observation. But eventually, they completed the exercise. The students cheered softly, while the creature produced a deep, resonant hum that seemed to carry approval, or perhaps pride. Lyra stepped forward, her heart racing with excitement. "We did it," she said. "Together, humans and monster." The creature responded with a slow nod, its eyes reflecting curiosity, understanding, and something close to respect. It had learned that humans were capable of bravery, intelligence, and cooperation that no other creature had shown. Ms. Kale smiled quietly. "This is the essence of the lesson," she thought. "Humans are not only capable of surviving, they are capable of teaching and inspiring even the most alien of beings." As the students packed their things to leave, The creature remained near the vent, observing them. It had learned more in these few hours than it could have imagined. Humans were fragile and small, yes, but their intelligence and cooperation made them extraordinary. Tomorrow, the creature thought, it would test them further, but it would do so differently. It would no longer just observe. It would interact, challenge, and perhaps even guide them in ways that would deepen their bond. For now, though, it remained silent, learning in its own way, fascinated by humans and the strength of their spirit. Humans, it realized, were not just survivors. They were thinkers, innovators, and collaborators. They could face monsters without fear and teach even the unknown to understand courage, patience, and intelligence, and that made them remarkable. The classroom was unusually quiet that morning. Sunlight streamed through the crystal walls, but there was a tension in the air, a sense that something important was about to happen. The students filed in, sensing that today's lesson would be different. Lyra, Mara, and Joran exchanged glances. They had faced puzzles and challenges with the creature, learned from it, and even taught it strategies. But today they felt it would test them in a way they could not predict. From the vent above, the creature watched as well. It had spent the night reviewing everything it had observed and learned. Humans were clever, cooperative, and resilient, but now it wanted to see their true nature. It wanted to understand how far their courage and intelligence could stretch, and whether they deserved its respect. Ms. Kyle entered the room, her calm presence grounding the students. "Today," she said softly, "you will face a challenge unlike any other. Remember, humans survive not because they are strongest, but because they are clever, observant, and brave. Trust your minds, trust each other." The creature made its first move. Shadows shifted across the walls, lights flickered, and small objects floated in unusual patterns. The classroom became a maze of obstacles, each more complex than the last. The students' eyes widened. This was no simulation. This was a real challenge. Lyra stepped forward. "Stay calm," she whispered to her team. "We can solve this. We've faced puzzles before, but this is alive. We have to think carefully." Joran nodded. "Humans are good at observing patterns. Let's watch first, then act together." The creature observed them silently as they analyzed the room. It could sense their minds working, each student contributing ideas, each movement coordinated with precision. Unlike any monster it had known, they did not panic, nor did they act impulsively. They were calculating, creative, and patient. Lyra directed the first move. They had to navigate floating obstacles without triggering a cascade of falling objects. She calculated the path while Mara moved carefully along the route. Joran adjusted the positions of floating panels using a combination of gestures and holographic controls. Every action required trust and coordination. The creature tilted its head, fascinated. Humans were flexible, innovative, and brave. Even when obstacles moved unpredictably, they adapted. Each solution they devised was unexpected yet logical. It had never seen such ingenuity in any species. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. The students solved one challenge after another, each more complex than the last. The creature, instead of disrupting them, began to participate in subtle ways. It moved objects to create new patterns, testing them further, but also guiding them when necessary. Its behavior was no longer just observation, it was engagement. At one point, a floating panel threatened to block the final path. Lyra quickly calculated a countermeasure, using the creature's own movements to redirect it safely. "It's helping us," she whispered. "It trusts us." The creature made a low, resonant hum, almost like approval. It had learned something vital. Humans were clever, brave, and capable of reasoning in ways no other species it knew could. They were worthy of respect, not fear. Ms. Kale watched quietly, proud but silent. The students were proving the very lesson she had hoped they would learn. Humans were not just survivors. They were thinkers, innovators, and collaborators, able to face danger with both courage and intelligence. Finally, the last obstacle was cleared. The classroom fell silent, the only sound the hum of the colony's energy grid. Lyra and her team exhaled, relief mixing with exhilaration. They had completed the challenge not by strength but by teamwork, observation, and clever thinking. The creature hovered at the center of the room, its eyes large and reflective. It had learned as much in these hours as the humans had. It recognized their intelligence, their bravery, and their spirit. And for the first time, it made a deliberate choice. not out of instinct but out of understanding. It stepped forward, lowering its body to the floor, signaling trust rather than threat. It mimicked a gesture of peace, folding its limbs in a way that mirrored the student's own posture. Lyra stepped closer, extending a hand. The creature did not touch it immediately, but it held eye contact, acknowledging the connection. "You've earned my respect," the creature communicated, not in words but through gestures and patterns of movement. "You are clever, brave, and worthy." The student's eyes widened. Lyra smiled softly. "And we respect you," she said. "You're not a monster to fear, you're a friend and a teacher." A soft, resonant sound echoed through the room, a mixture of approval and something like joy. The creature had learned about humans, and the humans had learned about the creature. In that moment, fear transformed into respect and curiosity blossomed into understanding. Ms. Kale finally spoke, her voice warm and proud. "The true lesson was never about monsters. It was about humans, about courage, intelligence, empathy, and cooperation. You have shown that these traits are stronger than fear, stronger than brute strength, and more powerful than any weapon." The students nodded, understanding the depth of her words. They had faced a being far stronger, far more alien, and yet they had prevailed, not through force but through intelligence and teamwork. The creature lingered for a moment longer, studying each student. Then it made a slow, deliberate movement toward the vent, signaling that it would remain nearby, learning, observing, and perhaps, in time, helping. Humans had proven themselves worthy, and the creature had learned that even the smallest, seemingly fragile beings could hold extraordinary power in their minds and hearts. As the students left the classroom, they laughed softly, still exhilarated. "We really did it," Mara said. "We faced a monster and it respected us." "Yes," Lyra replied. "And we've learned something more. Humans aren't just survivors. We're clever, inventive, and brave. That's our true strength," Jorn added, "and monsters, or anyone else for that matter, might respect us for it." From the shadows, the creature observed silently, a faint glow reflecting in its eyes. Humans were unpredictable, intelligent, and brave. It had never encountered beings like them. They had survived not by power but by wit, cooperation, and spirit. It would remember this day forever. Ms. Kale stood at the doorway watching her students. She knew that this was more than a lesson in monsters. It was a lesson in humanity, what humans were capable of, and why their ingenuity and courage were unmatched in the galaxy. For the creature, the lesson was clear. Strength alone does not make a being formidable. Intelligence, creativity, empathy, and courage are far more powerful. And humans, small and fragile as they appeared, embodied all these qualities. The story of today would remain in the memory of the creature, in the minds of the students, and in the heart of the teacher. The bond they had formed, built on respect and understanding, would guide their future encounters. As the classroom emptied, the creature lingered, silent but aware, ready to continue learning, observing, and perhaps teaching in its own way. Humans had proven themselves extraordinary. They had faced the unknown and emerged not only unscathed, but triumphant in intellect and spirit, and the galaxy would never underestimate them again. For humans, the true monsters were not always external. They were challenges to the mind, tests of courage, and opportunities to demonstrate ingenuity. And today, humans had shown that they could face all of them, and even a creature far stronger, with unwavering courage and brilliance. The creature's eyes glimmered one last time before it retreated to the shadows of the vent. It had learned, it had respected, and it had been changed. Humans, it realized, were remarkable, and it would never forget.